Good morning, everyone. I'm super enthusiastic to announce my dear Professor Maaheen Ahmed. She's speaking today. She's associate professor here at Gent University. She's the principal investigator of the comics project on which I'm working, and my nice colleague over there is also working. She has very broad interests. She works on contemporary, alternative graphic novels and comics in English and in French. Her interests include superheroes, autobiographical comics, the representation of war in comics, I'm not sure what's happening with it, and children in comics. And I think today she'll be mostly talking about her first book, which is Openness of Comics Generating Meaning Within Flexible Structures, which was published by the University Press of Mississippi in 2016. Thanks a lot, Maaheen, for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for including me in this program. Of course, now I get to voice my deepest regret of not ever learning Italian. To talk to you today about this book. This is my first book. It's called Openness of Comics. The subtitle is a bit unwieldy. It's not my favorite subtitle. We have long discussions about what that could mean, generating meaning in flexible structures. But maybe by the end of this presentation talk, you might have a better idea of what that subtitle is getting at. But yeah, maybe generating meaning within flexible structures, that could be anything. And that is really the problem. But the main purpose of this book is really just to figure out how comics can generate meaning. I've called it a semiotic approach in this book for this presentation, but it's let's just say it's a very light semiotic approach. So it's based on Umberto Eco's concept of the open work of art, and when he wrote his book, he has several examples from different kinds of art, right, different forms. I think his favorite is Vinegar's Wake by James Joyce, and about Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's electronic compositions, and informal art like Anthony Deppi's. I just put Anthony Deppi's, but it could be anything, right? So he was just trying to figure out. He read the book in the '60s. Most of you probably know that. And he's just trying to figure out how these works were working, I think, and how these works conveyed meaning or different kinds of meaning, or how they could involve the reader and the viewer and the listener in different ways. So that's the basic premise of the open work of book. Those are several examples of it. So I've got a few quotes. Putting a lot of text on slides is not ideal, but just a few quotes to start. So obviously, if you talk about an open text, then you have its opposite, right? A closed text. And his argument is that it depends on the basic process of text interpretation. And I continue to quote, "The structure is made possible by the nature of the system of codes and subcodes constituting the world. The reader finds his freedom in deciding how to activate one or another of the textual levels, and in choosing which codes to apply." So if we think about comics, there's always a lot of talk of closure and how the reader is sort of involved in reading and creating and recreating the comics work. And I kind of find that this might be a way to broaden the argument, because obviously it's not really happening just within the gutters or between the gutters or between the panels or within the panels, but it's just happening, when you get down to it, it's happening everywhere, almost. And there, I accidentally repeated the same quote, so we can move on. And another concept that I kind of find very interesting is that this open work is also work in movement. So it offers a possibility of numerous different interventions. It's not an amorphous invitation to this indiscriminate participation. meaning that this work has a structure, however loose that structure will be. I guess most of the examples to many of us might be Finnegans Wake, right? It seems impossible, or it seems impossible to read, it seems impossible to reconstruct, but there is something underlying it that sort of holds it together, even though that structure is very, unclear, or might not be clear to you when you read it the first time. So, there's something fluid about it, but there's an underlying containment of that work. So the invitation offers the performer the opportunity for an oriented insertion into something which always remains the world intended by the author. So there's room for the reader, viewer, listener, whatever. There's always this room, even though it seems like the reader, listener, viewer has a lot of possibility. That possibility is actually always contained within certain limits by the artist, author. I wrote this just because I often think in pictures that just make my life easier. So working movement is like one of Alexander Calder's mobiles mobile. So it's just one of them, something that will always change no matter where you are, depending on if there's air or not, depending on where you're standing, depending on how it's placed. So what does that have to do with comics? So I must admit, it's been a long time since I've actually gone back to this book. So thank you again very much for this opportunity. But I can also already see the problems, and that's also fine, right? I mean, it's just part of the job that things grow and things change. So what you see here is part of the corpus, and it's quite broad. It's a bit, you could also say it's very all over the place. But again, there's an underlying logic to all of this. Most of these works are from the late 1960s until the 2000s, so a moment where comics are kind of changing and becoming, they're moving maybe from comics to what you could call the graphic novel. And so we have Will Eisner's A Contract with God, which is sold as the first graphic novel, which it wasn't, but it was for a long time considered, even by comic scholars, as the first graphic novel. Then we have Le Chateau by Olivier Duprez, published by Fumetti, the Belgian French alternative publisher. And it's an adaptation of Franz Kafka's The Castle. It's a very loose adaptation. It's also something that I love because it really, for me, it sort of epitomized this idea of the open work. Then there's Le Voyage by Baudouin. Lovecraft, so this is by two German, a writer-artist duo, Raimund Kleist, you might have heard of in the interview. They kind of wrote this fictionalized biography of Lovecraft and sort of combined his stories with his so-called biography. It's very fluid. And then we have some key vidals, the Nicopole, trilogy Nicopole, which is science fiction. Then we have Introducing Kafka by Crum and Davis which is a very didactic comic, literally, even though it's by Crum, it's just literally one of those. It exemplifies those moments where comics are used for education or for simplifying ideas and kind of flatten it out. And you have La Guerre des Tranchées by Claudie from Hill. There's 20e siècle, which is maybe not so well known, a bit obscure, but I found it fascinating, and I'll get back to that. And then Salut Deleuze by Martin Tomtik and Jens Balzer, the two German artists. So the corpus continues, but I think maybe, well, I had a second slide which has disappeared, but there were a few, there were several works by Finnish authors, and you see one of them, you can maybe see that. So this is by Marco Turunen, and then you have Mattuti's adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you have Sandman, and you have Arkham Asylum, the adaptation of City of Glass. So these works that you're seeing right now, these were what I thought were more or less open works, and I'll try and elaborate on on the criteria I used to come to that conclusion. I also, it's also in the book, but it's kind of like, I always see this as a kind of scale, so it's not like it's either or, but it's not a mutually exclusive category, but it's just that these words are either they move towards openness or they move towards closeness, but it's always just a scale, right? And itself is a movement. Yeah, so this is probably familiar to those of you who work on comics, and maybe less familiar to those of you who are just starting out in comic studies, but it's this wonderful page layout. Categorization of page layouts, right? So you have, depending on whether it's the narrative or the textual narrative that's dominant, or the composition that's dominant. That's by Benoit Peters. There's an English translation, and basically the idea was that there are 4 different kinds of page layouts. So you have the conventional, the decorative, the rhetorical, the productive, and just very, very quickly go through these examples. So you have something like this, which is conventional in the sense that the layout adjusts to the narrative. It kind of is in service of the story. It doesn't take over this visual aspect. It remains very, sorry, this is actually rhetorical. So the conventional is when the layout is not changing, and the rhetorical is when it's actually adjusting itself to the narrative, but it's not dominant, but the visual aspect of the layout is not taking over the page. And then you have all these fluid categories of productive layouts where the layout actually supposedly dictates the narrative. Of course, it'll never really do that, but it kind of changes very, very dramatically and sort of takes over the page. And into considering the open work, I found this idea quite interesting in the sense that you have this kind of symbiosis between the words and the images and the layout, and everything is working and together, and one is not subordinate, one aspect is not subordinated to the other. And yeah, so that was why I started with the layout to try and just figure out how complete a comic can be, or how much it can take advantage of these different elements that constitute it. So the words, the images, the layouts, the way it's set up. And, so I kind of simplified that a bit, because why not? So when the words are dominant, you can have conventional rhetorical again. I'm working with scales again. So if the images are dominant, you can move between decorative to productive. Just a bit of some technicality there. So what makes it a comic open? What can be the elements? This is what's in the book. So it says, well, there's ambiguity, there's suggestiveness, there's subversion. I mess with the ambiguities, right? Because it's always there. It's always there in literary works of art. And there in literature and works of art, it's what we pride on. It's what gives us material to work with, to interpret. Suggestiveness, again, it's tied to this possibility of having different layers of meaning, or just sort of alluding to different paths of interpretation that you can take within a page, within a panel. And well, subversion, right? I think in hindsight, I would put this under quotation marks, because subversion is also so context specific. It's really tied to its time, or it's really tied to its particular moment. I find that I find it slightly problematic, just because now we have this whole discourse about how comics are so special, and how the graphic novels are subvert so many different elements of comics. And well, I think the idea behind this whole book that I was trying to get at was that maybe the elements are already there in every comic. It's just that people, well, artists or writers, they use just different, cherry pick and use them in different, constellations, let's say. So this is a page from Reinhard Kleist's Lovecraft. I will show a lot of these pages. Well, I feel it's not a very long presentation, but I just thought this moment when you have a mix of media, so you have the sketching, you have these paints, element that's slightly painted, you have the text at the back and the printed material, and I really find that this kind of collaging of different elements sort of offers the possibility to read more into the work or just skip over it, right? So this is where the work is in movement in a way with every disjunctive visual technique, with every, just the very fact that the combination that you have these little captions sort of interrupting like the whole visual element of the page. And then it's just, obviously this is something that looks like a sketch, it's not a sketch, it's actually part of the actual story. There's also somehow trying to lay that process of creation there. So there's also this element of self-reflection, which again is another element of openness. I like this. I like this quote. It's discontinuity is the basis of the comics universe. Something you're probably familiar with, but there are so many different kinds of discontinuity. First, obviously, the very obvious one is that you have the gutters between different panels, but then you also have discontinuity within the panel and then discontinuity on the page, just because of the contrast between the words and the images and the different kinds of images that are brought together, the different techniques. There's so many ways in which this discontinuity just sort of seeps in to the page or into the comic, and obviously you also have then all these references that can seep in, either with either through media references to use of different media, there's intertextuality. So maybe there's a take-home message for this talk about discontinuity, but it's something also open to discussion. Everything that I present here, it's quite, it really should be teased out or, thought about carefully, I think. So I talk a bit about disjointedness and how openness often depends on the extent of the indirectness and elusive scope of relationships between and amongst words and images, as well as between and amongst panels. So it's just one form. Several examples of discontinuity. And this is my absolute favorite double spread that I like to show to people who don't work in comics. So this is that kind of thing that kind of blows people apart. Of course, I've commented a bit for you because I've added a bit of text about the collage, but usually this is that double spread that sort of takes you over, right? It's from Arkham Asylum, Grant Morrison, David Keane. It doesn't look very much like a comics page anymore. Everything's blown out. You still have a few allusions to, these could be tarot cards. It could be a lot of things. It could also be the panels. It's this is I don't know how many people have read Arkham. So this is when the Joker announces that it's going to be a feast of the fools, and he's going to they're going to take over this asylum. So it's the beginning of the chaos that he's going to set in motion, and also the beginning of the tests that he's going to put Batman through. So on the surface, this would seem like an open work, and it is in the sense that it's combining so many different allusions to tarot. I have no idea what's going on there, but there's a clock. There are different visual elements that are clearly loaded with meaning. But this is also a good example of how the work is tries to be so open that it just, like, the structure just falls apart, or it remains too elusive. For those of you who've written on Artemis Island, you might have read the 20th or the 25th anniversary edition, where you actually have Grant Morrison's script at the back. So you actually, and you need that script to understand how the many references that are in there, even if they're visualized, they're very present, they're in your face, but most of us don't know them. They're just so obscure, they're linked to magic, they're linked to different philosophies that, well, are not very present in our everyday. So this is a good example of how openness kind of can be stretched out, and then eventually that work just can almost become closed, because it just bypasses the reader or viewer, as it were. So yeah, and yeah, again, this idea of collages, but also not just images, but also different techniques that come in, and that, in the case of comics, have their own relevance, because, well, comics are a popular medium. They're usually quickly drawn, and they usually, well, they're often black and white, but here you have something that clearly the artist put a lot of time into, that is very layered, it's almost painted. It evokes a different, it evokes the entire legitimation issues that surround comics, the making of comics. And of course now Arkham Asylum is a graphic novel, so that is in itself quite interesting in how the graphic novel tries to break away from its comic-ness almost. Yeah, so these are just two pages that I took from Isler's 20e Ciel, which I think remains fairly obscure. It's not, it's very hard to even find the earlier volumes. It's a Belgian artist. He's a very comics artist, but he's a very skilled artist, as you can see. These are very carefully drawn images. It's about 4 or 5 volumes, and it's about this alternative history that is being conveyed. There's an angel of history, sort of an Benjamin figure, but in these volumes, it revisits, different events that mark the 20th century, and it communicates, and that was one of the most interesting parts for me, is that it communicates through sending messages, through sending emails, and a lot of these panels, they reproduce that element of windows, internet pages. So here the page and this doesn't happen very often. It does now, but I also just find this element of just transposing different kinds of media onto the comics page, and just adding that they add an extra layer as well. And obviously it's kind of revisiting history, so there are all these historical references. And at the end of each volume, you realize that the story being told was probably not the real story, or that there's another story, and each time you have to rethink, all your assumptions about what was happening. It follows these 3 kids, triplets, but then not quite. So it just offers, it's the same basic story, but just retold through different figures. So these were, again, subversion again, and then there's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of fiction, and metafiction, because when you have something like this, it's commenting on the, a current age, or the internet, the way we communicate with images, the way we kind of reconstruct history, or can be a way to reconstruct history, reconstruct our assumptions. And then later on, I didn't, in this book, there are not many autobiographical novels as such, autobiographical comics. So basically the corpus that Brilliant Corpus I saw on the 34th slide, it's divided into 4 or 5 categories. So the first one was fictionalized biographies and memories, and the second one was adventure and superheroes, the third one was noir, Fourth one was fantasy and science fiction, and the fifth one was looking at adaptations. And so one of the points was also to look at works that are not usually talked about in comic studies. So and also to move away from just autobiography. But so this work that you see on your right, it's my left, so this one here, it's by a Finnish artist who's a painter. So he only made this this short series of graphic novels. It's 2 or 3 books. And it's again a very surreal story. It's called Taxi Ride Through Van Gogh's Ear. And yeah, he even in his paintings he likes to just portray himself. So he's always the protagonist. Here you also have him sort of going as the main character, sort of represented. And then what you see on your left is from Marie Parade. It sort of alludes to Mickey Parade, these Mickey comics that are digests that one had as a kid. But this is by Frédéric Boilly and his companion from that point. And I just, again, this particular page is great because it sort of captures this movement of doors, of windows, of their actual space, but it's obviously also functioning as a kind of gutter at the same time. And he's very much, it's a slightly problematic comic. It's a very voyeuristic comic. It's very much there as someone who is actually transposing their lives or their everyday exchanges onto the comics form. As you can see here, so you see just he does portray himself later on, but it's very much someone who's behind the camera most of the time, just following these women. So just check the time here. Yeah. So this is from Edmond Baudouin's The Voyage. The Voyage. I particularly love this idea of the open head, because the main character here from Simon, his head is never complete, so it's always open and it's constantly changing according to the situation. It's just the top of it remains open until almost the very end. And Baudouin had a nice little anecdote about how I can't remember if it was him or his brother or some child was drawing these heads, but they weren't closing them. So they left them open, and their teacher interpreted that as a sign of schizophrenia, just because this is breaking that convention to such an extent. Because it is rare actually to find. You can find hair on the head, but to have a child just draw a head but not round it off, it's quite rare. And here it's just great because that head sort of here just reflects all his anxieties and fears without him actually putting them in words, without the main character actually putting them in words. Here, of course, it's the cage. This is the opening scene, which, with his family, have those themes. So this is from Le Château, the castle, so Olivier de Preze's adaptation of Franz Kafka's The Castle. And the most beautiful thing about this book is that you can't read it, you can follow it, but you need to read The Castle to really understand what's going on or how it's changed. So again, it's open, right? So I call it open, but it's open to a very broad extent that is kind of shaky, because you need to also have those other references to actually follow the story or understand what the press is doing with these with the main character, with the story. It's on top of that, it's not very comics-like. He uses woodcuts. They're often, I think most of the time, divided, well, there are often 2 images per page. And yeah, it's great because it's woodcut technique in itself sort of captures the how the situation has no outcome in the castle, and what the story situation has no outcome, and how everything is so obscure and so oppressive, and so you kind of also adds this element of xenophobia in the story, which you can see here. What do you want, stranger? Another great adaptation, which again, it's Paul Auster's City of Glass, which was adapted by Paul Karasek and Dave Mazzucchelli. And this was, again, for those of you who've read The City of Glass, it's a very complex, or those of you who've read Auster, they're very complex novels. They're so layered, they're going in so many different directions. To sort of map them onto the comics page is it's not easy. And Karasek and Mazzucchelli talk a lot about that. And this particular adaptation, it works very well, so it does capture the complexity of the novel. Yeah, well, here you have classic rhetorical reaction, the page just towards the end when the main characters is basically starving and disappearing. You kind of have this complete breakdown of the story. Most of the story just doesn't unfold through this regular grid, but here it gradually just literally crumbles on the page. Yeah, I'd actually just end with this. This is work by an Italian artist, so, but I just love it sort of captures that tension between keeping a structure but also leaving room for interpretation or openness. This should technically, well, I didn't do that here, but these actually move. So he makes a lot of these fluid structures, but there's usually a little machine, and these bands that you see sort of contained within this frame, it constantly is in movement. So again, it captures that idea of the work and movement constantly changing, but at the same time it remains contained within this frame, which for comics is also great because there's always a game of framing and then breaking those frames and then moving through those frames. And I will end with that. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
Are there questions for Professor Ahmed? In English or Italian?
Yeah, tell me.
In English, maybe?
Okay,
Well, I find super interesting the connection that there might be between openness and radio subversion, although you also said that it's connected to like contextual instances. I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a bit more of what you think might be this kind of connection that there might be between an open work and its subversive potential.
And for comics or just in general?
No, sorry, for comics specifically, the form of comics as a possibly open form.
Yeah, I think it's with this something like this, for instance. This is great, right? Because it's kind of just breaks that idea. Well, just the fact that its head is open. That's kind of it's open, but is it subverting? It's kind of subverting or surprising at least our expectations. But another way of looking at it would be to just if you think of the entire legitimization debate, right? Then there are fixed ideas of what comics are, they're popular culture, they're cheap, they're serial, they have to be they can be easily reproduced, they can also be either ephemeral, they can be forgotten, but then you have something like the graphic novel as a concept, well, as a phenomena, that they're just these very expensive books that are there to stay and you can't throw away. And that kind of, again, it does bring the comic into a different realm, and you see that with the graphic novel. It's sort of entered. You find that at your local bookstores, or your comic stores. It won't be in the kiosk. It'll be, it'll be in a bookstore, maybe even a store that sells art books. So there you kind of have this subversion thing. There's also, I forgot to talk about it, but there's obviously that wonderful tension also between something that's serial, right? So something that has to be followed, that will continue, and that's what a lot of comics were, but a lot of, all the books that I look at, most of them, they're self-contained. And that in itself offers, it's different. It kind of, that self-containment also offers, it's like that overarching frame that contains the story within it that can move. But on the other hand, it's, I'm digressing a bit, but I just love that tension, that just the very fact that something is serial is in itself also a bit open, because it's going to keep on going in different directions, but you can always choose, but sometimes or you can imagine what directions it will go into. To sum up, because I think it would be, it'd just be, it would be breaking with assumptions associated with the medium at a certain point. But I think it happened with the graphic novel at a certain point earlier, so 15 years ago. It's no longer the case. I don't know how the graphic novel subverts right now, or could subvert it. At that point maybe it did. Challenged. Legitimization hierarchies or whatever.
Other questions? Yeah, Mark.
Hi, thank you for the lecture. And I was wondering, about openness. I really like the concept of openness you were explaining, but I was wondering if it was applicable also to very tight comics, and for very tight comics, I mean something like Pax Americana, Watchmen, so like comics where everything is very, very studied to be exactly that place, but they also challenge you to find different pathways. I mean, this is maybe more than Watchmen, Pax Americana is really, really apparent. I don't know, thinking about that double spread where you have 3 timelines entwining each other in the same place, and you get in any way you read a page, you find a different meaning. You can write it reading all the panels on the double spread, you can write the single time sequences, you can write it in vertical, you can invent a way of reading it, and you will discover something more with time. And also, I don't know, that comic invites you also to read it from the end to the beginning, because it's all about time twisting and subverting the way of time inside a comic. So you would talk about openness also in this kind of situation, or I don't know.
I don't know the comic, but it sounds
It's basically it's from the Multiversity series, so it's written by Morrison, it's drawn by quasi. And so they're taking basically the old characters that inspired the Watchmen characters, so the Charlton Comics ones, and they're telling it's very hard to explain because it's basically the concept is easy. Just the president of the United States is killed by this superhero, basically. So the Captain America of that world is killing the president of the United States, and the president has just discovered this crazy algorithm that makes him predict time, basically, makes him aware of everything in time. And so the comic starts from the very end, so the single shot is killing the president, and it's a backward sequence that goes back in time to the one falling from a spaceship shooting the president, and then time takes a lot of weird forms, basically, and we have to discover how all of this happened. And at the end, like there is a note saying, okay, now you can read this comic from the end to the beginning and get another experience. But still, like the comic is actively challenging you to, I don't know, push the boundaries of time. I don't know. But also Watchmen. I mean, every time you read it again, you will find new hidden layers, hidden storylines. You know? So is that openness as well, even if the comic is like a perfect static machine without, I don't know, the kind of ambiguity maybe.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, because Watchmen, for instance, each time you come back to, like you said, you make different connections. Like the first time I read it, well, I remember the first time how it was with the first time I read it, but the third time, well, just because I work a lot of children in comics right now, I just started noticing the little kid sort of reading near the kiosk, right? And just the fact that he's reading this adventure comic, which in itself reflects on, well, what comics are supposed to be, what comics can do, which is what Watchmen is kind of doing, right? Testing those boundaries a bit. So for me, it would be an open word, right? It's always quite, I'm also making my life easier here, I think, but it's a question of scale, right? So it's moving towards openness or closeness, but and it also sometimes, like with the Pax Americana comic that you described, sometimes I might start, for instance, just hearing it, this sort of started thinking of all these Hollywood films or these disaster movies and the premises of that. And I can't help wondering if there's somehow commenting on that a bit, and which might not have been the case, but it might be just me going overboard with my reading. But again, so if you can, if that work does allow for that reading, even if it wasn't really trying to, there you're in that shaky terrain of authorial attention. I don't want to go there, but obviously if you can read into it, then clearly there's something more in there. And I also feel like just a conventional comic, right, or something that's not a graphic novel or something that's very, it's a serial production that also has elements of openness. That was kind of, and one day I'll kind of try and rework these ideas.
Thanks.
Giulio?
Abbiamo tempo?
Sì, sì.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. It's probably just a silly question, but I was curious, how would you think about this concept of openness or closeness? I think it's when thinking about not so comics before the 60s and comics for children and so on, because obviously there were, especially if you were looking at periodicals with some more pedagogic and meanings, obviously in a way the content would be more dictated and the text should be supposed to be more closed. But I'm not sure what's the answer, but I was curious what you think about it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in that case, there's also something to be said about ambiguity and how, and for children, maybe we allow a certain degree of, for the child reader, we would allow for a certain degree of ambiguity, but maybe not too much. And that's where, there's a subversive element of ambiguity, let's say, because then you can have different kinds of readings, but also readings that you might not want the children to read into. But so the ones I've read, so I've been reading a few periodicals for children from the First World War and then the interwar period. And they seem like fairly direct narratives, or there's not too much. There's often not too much, but then there are moments, right? There are always these little moments when it might just be a panel, it might just be a drawing, but there are these little moments where you have something that makes you, well, that sort of sparks your interest, or that says that's not, yeah, it's not very, there's something that kind of changes. For instance, in Becky's scene, for instance, it's a very classic comic. It's not very, it's beautifully done, right? It's a precursor to the Clear Line, so cool. And but you have these little moments when she kind of, when the First World War breaks out, she starts writing her own memoirs. And she kind of takes over the narrative, and at some point she also starts drawing. And that, it just happens for a little while, right? So it's only 2 or 3 pages in that entire span. But at that moment, something very, very strange is happening. And that there you're moving towards openness, because she draws the general, she draws the president, and then she even signs the work, right? She says, it's like a note at the bottom, sort of saying, oh, we only lightly touched on the drawings, and we just fixed the grammar of it, but it's really Becasse's words. But there you have these different levels of authorial voices, authorial constructions that work. Also on the visual level, that in itself is fascinating. And then there's also another thing that sometimes happens in these magazines. It's just, I think there's this fascination for the image in general. And some of these, even if the story is not very, it's just a regular story, or it's not very innovative, you have, in Fiat, for instance, you have these pages that are just beautifully drawn. They're just, it's a decorative layout, but it's just eye-catching. And there again, there's more, I think, at stake that seems to meet the eye. That's it. Keep it.
Thank you.
There's plenty more time, actually. There's 15 more minutes to questions, if you want to.
If there's no one else, I'll go on.
Go, Julio. Bye.
No, but no one. Okay. I was just it's interested in what you just said, because I was thinking of one of the things that I was reading, and it's in a periodical for children and young people from Italy. And in 1948, so it's just 3 years after the Second World War ended, and there's this, I think, famous comic from Benito Jacobiti. I don't know if some of you will heard of it, obviously. And so it's Pippo and La Bomba Comica. So it's Pippo is one of the trappi. There are some famous characters from Jacobiti, earliest work. And in this kind of episode, it's I think 20 episodes maybe that were coming out weekly. And so they are trying to, without classic professor and the antagonist, try to build a bond that is a comic bond and not an atomic bond. So at the beginning, there's kind of a strong, peaceful message. But at the end, like the comics makes a fake end, and then the next where everything is absolutely beautiful and everybody is laughing instead of killing and making war, and the Stalin and Eisenhower hugging between them. But then the following week, the author comes inside the comics, and you can see Jacobiti, and it's telling the readers and the children that this was a fake end, and that in reality, right now you can't achieve peace. And so, in what you were saying, following Echo's words, so this is clearly, you're breaking the rules, so that there's a threat for openness, for clarity. But at the same time, when I was reading the comics, the message struck me out, because obviously this kind of beautiful, this surprise ending obviously is giving more strength to the message, I think, in a way. So you could be saying that obviously you were making clear that peace wasn't really achievable in a way at the time. Not peace, but maybe not making atomic bomb. So you can find between openness in a way, but also a very strict meaning that's being given to children. I know.
Yeah, I think in the case of comics, it's or comics for children, it's quite often I don't see it, so I'm not seeing too many comics for children. I'm wondering whether picture books might be a nice counterpoint, because there you often have a lot of room, a lot of strange things happening with, usually with the images, or where the child is sort of made to look for different kinds of readings, even though it is what it is, but there you kind of see a degree of experimentation, but also nudity of possible meanings. But in the comics for children, maybe not so much, but also just because, again, it is supposed to be a didactic comic, right? And that's what happens a bit in this wonderful comic by Robert Crumb, Kafka. It's just this introducing Kafka, right? So it could have been logic comics, it could have been anything, but all these comics that are used for pedagogical purposes. It's quite horrible. It's like he's also there are moments where it's very cruel of me to say that. It probably has its merits, but they literally sort of condense a lot of his short stories into 2 or 3 or 4 pages, right? And it's just crash course to Kafka's life, but also his works. And of course, these are works that are open, that have so many different ways of reading. Yeah, they're just very intense and also very rich. And just to see them kind of flattened out in 1 or 2 pages, it really doesn't work. But I guess I think that's why it's also interesting to look at these different kinds of comics, or trying to look at the entire, well, if you can, the entire production and the variety of comics and what can be sold as a comic or a graphic novel, to kind of understand how authors kind of negotiate with these, the means that they have, depending on the context, publication, or the intended audience. But yeah, that's a big question.
Grazie, Giulio. Other questions? Or we'll dive for a coffee?
I have one. You made a lot of examples of openness, about structures that collapse or explode in many ways, like collage, and that's really interesting. And I also was thinking about, for example, Chris Ware's work, which is very structured, very studied in every detail, but at the same time, I think it's really open, like his structure goes in multiple directions. Also about the book you can read it in many ways, you have to turn to open it in weird ways. And so I was asking what you think about this other kind of openness, really holding every details, but at the same time able to go in many ways. What is to let your reader to move into the space of the book?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, because I should have been maybe a little clearer, because I do think just because something like this, right? So a work that visually looks very it's following a conventional layout, let's say, it's very rigid, very structured, that does not necessarily mean that it's not open, because this is just one element, right? It's just a layout that it's using, but very often, even such a rigid layout in itself is loaded with meaning in our context, just because, well, it's so uncommon for a graphic novel to use that. But Chris Ware is a good example of how the very technical aspects of making a comic, like the design element, placing panels, adjusting pages, sort of, it's great, right? It looks so well constructed, but it's easy to read, but the minute you start reading it, it's not easy to read, it's very problematic, it goes in different directions, and despite very clear framing. And of course, the best example is building stories. You have the box, so it's contained, it's nicely contained, but then you open the box, and then there's so many different things that you can piece together and how you want to, but That's a great example.
Carlotta?
Let's reconnect to this last question. Just because Chris Ware recently published a book that is not even a book, is like just like a book without binding that you can build your own. It's like a build your own story, build your own book. And I wonder if like the binding can serve at all as one of the characteristics that make us understand openness in comics. And that's really reminds me also of one of the most recent graphic novels by Italian artist Alessandro Barucciani that was published in a box. It's a box containing like smaller binded like notebooks or something, and just
Like fanzines?
pieces of paper.
Like fanzines? Like thin like fanzines?
Yeah, like that, but like also it's that plus like pieces of paper, and I don't know. That's a real really weird reading experience. How would that fall into this whole
It's
paradigm?
it's the box, right? So it's the reading. There's still some kind of structure, but obviously it's I haven't seen that particular work. But for building stories, for instance, you still kind of can see a red thread through these very disparate elements, right? Each of them bringing in a different element of comics history, animation, different techniques that are sort of contributed to the medium, but obviously also different kinds of possible stories or elements of the story that you can sort of add elements of the protagonist story in that case. The first question about whether the binding is connected to openness, that's a great question, because it's really that tension, I think, between what you have something that, at least from the outside, is contained. That's why a graphic novel, for instance, it works so well, because you have that book, you can read it, you can reread it. It's like a regular novel. Each time you come back to it, you see different layers. Whereas if you have just a regular comic series, which is then maybe branching off, it has different versions, right? Maybe there's a tie-in with somebody else, or there's a spin-off, or it becomes in itself, that in itself could also be a kind of openness, because it's just so all over the place. But obviously the narrative then becomes very tricky to construe, or just the structure kind of falls apart, right? It's too semantic, let's say, that you can't really hold it together, or that it would take you a long time to actually hold it together. I guess that's it. The binding just makes it easier, but it's not essential, right? But yeah, and I like the idea of the boxes, that they kind of, because boxes in themselves, they're so loaded with meaning, right? They're archival, there's things they're portable, they're package.
It's like in between like a graphic novel and like a board game.
Yeah,
or,
exactly.
Like one of those book games, I guess, with different paths that you can go into. I don't like I've never read comic books that also have different paths. I think about like Mondo, like the board game. No, sorry, the book, the game book. But I don't know if there are game comic books either. Okay.
So you choose your own adventure.
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah, I've seen that. But it's very rare. There's something ludic about putting everything into a box and then piecing it together. There's also that element, that playful element that's also there. Yeah.
I'm really interested in the concept of openness as a concept, and I'd like to ask you, Mr. do you think there are comic that actually make the main point of the work to resist this kind of openness that seems so intrinsic to media.
Huh.
Like something that accepts only one meaning and only one type of interpretation.
I think something like, again, I would come back to the Kafka, introducing Kafka thing, right? That's where, even though there's so much potential, it's kind of flattened out. But I don't know, you could also say something like a superhero comic, I don't know, could also just be too closed or just flattening out the potential of comics. But I mean, when you actually open a superhero comics, it's just great. I mean, the ones I see, it's just so wild, it's just so insane, but also it's reflecting so, because it is it's a product of popular culture, it's a product of that context, that it's so American in a certain way, that there's always this kind of, again, here's when one has to question oneself whether it's just, whether I'm just reading into it. But I often find there's tough to read into, even with the superhero comic, and nowadays they don't even stick to a very regular layout, right? So visually they're very innovative, they're kind of breaking the frame very often. Very often they're also breaking the fourth wall, as it were, kind of aware of their own superhero-ness. So it's, yeah, at the end, maybe it's, maybe the children's comics are a good example of how something is, more closed, how comics become very flattened out or closed more than open. But yeah, I think there's something everywhere, or like in every kind of comic. Or, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ahmed, for this lovely talk. I think we all enjoyed it very much. Let's now go and have a coffee or a tea and some water. Yeah? And an applause, maybe.